We're running into the same goddamn thing as we did yesterday. Fuck it. All right, I'm just gonna post this thing over to the other site. I'm so over this. Let me see here. All right, Mark, you there?
I am here.
Perfect. Okay.
Looks like we're getting people coming into the new link.
Yes. Uh, I'll just post
uh,
one more time in the old one.
in the old one, yeah. Hmm. What do we have to say? Technology. Can't live without it.
Uh,
Can't live with it.
yeah. I'm just gonna go over. I'm just gonna to this link for this morning's live stream. I'll just put it in there.
All right.
You know. Okay. All right, we should be square now. Thanks again, everybody, for your patience. Glad that we got this.
Now, some are saying they can't hear anything. Is it muted until it starts?
Oh, it should be okay.
Oh,
Now
now
she
they're
should
saying,
hear it.
okay, I
Yeah,
hear it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there
Okay,
we go.
good.
Okay, perfect.
Hmm.
All right, everybody. Well, again, apologies for that. What a mess. We had the same thing last night. It's something about setting up these streams in advance and trying to make them private to keep everybody safe and secure. It's wanting to make its own thing in Zoom every time we go do this. So I apologize. We apologize. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. We're not even starting late today. Welcome, everybody. It's really good to meet all of you. For those of you who are back from last night, welcome. It's good to have you. I know a couple of you, Rebecca and others, are here from last night, which is fabulous. For those who are joining us new, welcome as well. And those who are going to be watching this after the fact, welcome also. We'll just start off by saying really quick the same thing we said the other day. We just have a tremendous amount of respect for this Love After Porn Reddit group. Um, Mark and I have been acquainted with lots of different ways of support out there in lots of different forums. You know, we try to keep our nose in the know when it comes to those kinds of things. But one of our D2C subscribers is a moderator for this channel or for this Reddit group. And when she plugged us into this whole network and we looked up this channel, we could not believe that there was this network of 50,000 spouses, nearly 50,000 spouses and addict partners as well, who are working through betrayal trauma and looking for support. And just kind of warmed our heart, to be honest. I
Yeah,
mean, it's sad that there's a group of that size out there, but it is indicative
true.
of the magnitude of what people are dealing with. And we just have such tremendous respect for all of you. The fact that you are watching this, whether it's recorded or on Saturday morning, I mean, you could be a million places, but you're here. And we just so appreciate all of you and have tremendous amounts of respect for you. To that end, we this is the first kind of stream other than last night, of course, which was a mess for the first 20 minutes. We got it figured out. But this is the first one of these that we've done outside of our podcast or outside of our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples. We don't do these kinds of things outside of live presentations very often, but we just, like I said, have a tremendous amount of respect for you and wanted to do something that would be of help for you guys and give you also a taste, a little bit of this Dare to Connect program that you hear a lot about on the podcast. Tell you a little bit more about it, and we also have a special offer just for the Love After Porn folks who have considered joining Dare to Connect, but maybe just haven't taken the plunge yet. It's going to be half off of the first month plus the 2 week usual free trial, which is a pretty sizable savings that puts you at about $145 for the first 6 weeks of the program. And that gives you about 40 some odd hours of content. So anyway, we're really excited about that, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we wanted to jump into questions. This is we'll see how formats for this in the future go, but for this first event, given all of the technical intricacies, we thought it would be wise to keep it simple, and so we sent out a survey, which we know our moderators here today have been kind enough to share with all of you for the last week or so. And we went ahead and went through all of those different questions. Thank you so much for sending them. And we selected 10 that we thought would be easiest to, not easiest to cover, but just an easy in terms of we could actually address them within the time frame that we've got here. Because those of you who do therapy or do Dare to Connect or do things like that, you know how fast the time goes. In fact, we went over quite a bit last night. So we went through the first 5 of those 10 questions last night. And we will, by the way, be making that broadcast available for replay, just so you know. So I'm in the process of figuring that side out of it as well, and we'll coordinate with the moderators and make sure you guys have links to that. And then we are also here doing the second set today. So we apologize if we weren't able to select your question in advance. We'll work to try to do those another time. We're hoping that we'll be doing these on a somewhat regular basis with this group. If your moderators deem fit, if the powers that be deem fit for such a thing, and we hope that we can collaborate more in the future. But today we want to at least cover those. Feel free to comment in the chat and ask little questions if you'd like. We may have time to try and address some of those as we get towards the end. Moderators will be screening those as well, so that we will do our best to get you guys informed and clarify points where we can while getting through as much content as possible so that you guys, the goal today is for every one of you to be able to walk away not just with a cool discount to a program that can take your recovery to the next level and to give you a taste of that, but also to hopefully address something that will level up your healing today at the end of this hour. So with that in mind, we will just jump right in, if unless Mark's got anything to add. I talk a lot, in case y'all haven't figured that out. So anything you
Well,
want to add, Mark?
I was thinking about this logo last night after we finished sharing with all of you last night. I thought love after porn. And that is a multi-layered, really deep message, logo and description that you have for your group. Love after porn. And I was really thinking deeply on that. And I thought, wow, because love is the antithesis. It's the exact polar opposite of porn. Everything about porn has nothing to do with love. Everything about porn has nothing to do with true human intimacy and connection. And I really appreciate the name that you've chosen for your group, because what are you seeking? You're seeking to come out of that deep, dark place and come to this place of actual love, right? Come out of pornography back into the world of connection and appreciation and dignity and authenticity. And so I was just thinking about this name and I thought, wow, does that really not say this? And boy, we could talk about what love after porn means at like 20 different levels. So that just hit me last night. I was really pondering on that. So just love this name you've chosen.
I'm so glad you said that. You know, Mark and I have a colleague here locally where we live. I was at a seminar that he was presenting at years ago, and he started his seminar really interesting. He's a good presenter, and it was at a conference specifically for pornography and sex addiction and all those kinds of things. And he got up in front of the crowd and he said, you know, you could call this lots of different things. He said, but the best way I think to look at it is that this is a fight for love.
Yes, a fight for love.
I just love that phrase. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of resonated ever since. And Mark's Saying that reminds me of that, because you are choosing recovery, it's choosing connection. Mark and I, as two, we are therapists. I'm a CSAT and an LCSW. Mark's a board certified chaplain and therapist. We run our own individual clinics, but what makes us unique in our podcast work and the DDC program that we've created is that we are very open about the fact that, most importantly, probably of all, we're both addicts in long-term recovery. I just hit 9 years of sobriety on October 13th. So 9 years ago, as of October 13th, was the last time I chose my drug. And we, even though we've been in recovery for a long time successfully, we vividly remember the whole world that many of you find yourselves immersed in right now. And it is a hard place to be. It's hard
Yeah.
for a spouse. It's hard for the addict. And so many of you, we know, are spouses who are attending this. And as devastating as this is for the addict, as if that couldn't be more devastating, here you are as a spouse dealing with something you never signed up for.
Yeah.
And we just really honor you and the work you're doing. So thank you for being here, and it's a great way to start things off. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and we'll switch the slide here, and we'll jump into the very first question here.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
Mark, you
go.
want to take this one?
Yeah. Oh, and this is, boy, could we resonate with this question? We run into this all the time. And I want to say something before we read this question. It is absolutely understandable, legitimate, expected that someone who has suffered with betrayal trauma, the trauma of betrayal, is 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 going to have a survival mechanism inside of you that wants to get more information, right? For example, now that all of this is coming out with this person that I'm married to, or I'm in a partnership with, who is this person? Do I know who I'm in a partnership with? Has our entire relationship been a lie? Has he been gaslighting or manipulating me since we were dating? Who is this? Right? We can't have human intimacy and true love unless we know who we're with. Unless you let me see you and I let you see me, we cannot establish a foundational partnership without that understanding. So it's perfectly understandable that all of you partners would say, I need more information. Now, in having said that, this becomes a very complex and delicate place, because how do you balance that? And that's where I see this question coming from. Is it better to know all the details of his past bad behaviors and choices and indiscretions, or leave it to imagination? My partner was using porn every day and regularly sexting and exchanging nudes. I want to ask more about what he would say and do, but I'm not sure if it's morbid curiosity or something that would actually be beneficial to my healing and our relationship. That is really well said. And it's like walking a tightrope for you partners. Where is the balance in that? How much to know? How much not to know? Right? What does Steve and I say all the time? Yes, we want information, yet once Steve, you coined this years ago, once someone's punched you, they can't unpunch you. It's
Yeah.
done. It's in your head. You now know. And so how far do you take that?
It's a
Very
really good
deeply.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a question that couples face all the time. It's a question that couples oftentimes face, for example, during the formal disclosure process, right?
Yes.
When we're going
Yes.
through formal disclosure, the whole purpose of the formal disclosure, well, there's lots of purposes, but the big one is for a spouse to kind of have her day in court, for lack of a better term, meaning they have a chance to find their voice, explain how this has affected them, request an amends, and it's an opportunity for the addict to be honest, right, in totality about what has happened, where the addiction's gone, so that a partner has the opportunity to fully know him, like Mark was saying, and thereby make a choice of choosing this relationship going forward or not, right?
Exactly.
That's a complicated process, but that's
Yeah.
kind of the overall arching goal.
And what do we call it out there in the world? We call it informed consent.
Yes, exactly. Am I going to be with somebody, right, that I know, like Mark said, to in order for intimacy to happen, the main ingredient to that cake is knowing the other person.
Exactly.
And so when it comes to this question of how much details to know versus not, just as within a formal disclosure, it is a really delicate balance because what we're trying to do is find that fine line between creating accountability and a knowledge base without causing unnecessary or undue trauma.
Right.
So probably the best way to demonstrate what we usually recommend to our clients is to give you the example that I usually use with clients. So let's say let's use a scenario, and I apologize if this triggers anybody, but that's kind of that's the nature of recovery, right? So please use your tools outside of here if you feel like you need to, or let us know and we can direct you to something if need be. But let's say that you are a partner of an addict and you come to find out through some means that he has been going to strip clubs. Okay. When we run into those situations, we always recommend as a general rule that it's really important that a partner know the following information. How many times has he been to that strip club? Right? What occurred at it? Was there physical contact or not? Um, who else was involved? Did he go there with friends or alone? Right? Was money spent or not? Right? And again, what occurred there? Those are all facts that are usually considered relevant for a partner to know in this journey of knowing, quote unquote, knowing their spouse. Other details, however, can be overly triggering and can create unnecessary, what we would call trauma landmines for a partner that don't add to the narrative. What they do is they create these, again, trauma landmines for a partner that can be counterproductive down the road. So, for example, knowing the stripper's hair color or
Mm.
what her name was or what strip club it was. Those things, again, they don't create accountability on the part of the addict. What they do is they cause a spouse now to hate that entire part of town or to now be triggered by. I've worked with spouses who, no joke, will their kid's school is a one-way shot across town. They will drive 3 miles out of the way, both ways, 3 times a day, to not get within a mile of where their husband went to the strip club.
Right.
Right. And every time they go to the store and they see an attractive brunette haired woman, their trip to the store just was ruined, right?
Yep.
Because now their brain's thinking, I bet that was her. I bet that was her, right? And so hopefully that kind of gives an example of where you want to know that. So yeah, in terms of knowing that he was sexting and exchanging nudes, we would say as a general rule, again, now you at the end of the day as a partner we always teach this, you are the sole keeper of how much you want to know.
That's right.
When I'm working with a client, I'm a big believer, and Mark is as well. When we're navigating like a formal disclosure with a couple, the partner at the end of the day has final say on what they get to know and not. And if an addict is really serious about this process, their responsibility is to disclose whatever they need to, no matter how difficult. But we will, like, if a partner tells me, for example, hey, Steve, I want to know all these details and I'm helping her to get ready for disclosure, I will walk her through a series of questions to make sure that she's asking those things for the right reasons and that she really knows what she's getting into because information is a one-way street. And
Exactly.
once you know those things, you can't unknow them.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Nicole in the chat thread says, yes, the specific details like certain videos he watched. I wish I never knew because you can't erase the memory of it. And I love what she calls it here. Pain shopping is so damaging to the self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great way to put it.
Great way to put it.
And it makes sense. We want to normalize it for you ladies. When initially the brain's trauma response, one of the primary things it does when there's that big fallout is it's trying to remap reality and it's trying to find what we call safety in the details. It wants to know every nitty gritty thing and it thinks that that's what's going to keep it safe.
Well, and
Prop.
why do we do that? Because when disclosure comes, either trickled disclosure or oftentimes a partner will play detective and she'll uncover things that he didn't come forward with, or if it's a full therapeutic disclosure, her brain very legitimately says, "Whoa, wait a second. I feel like I don't know anything. Now I need to know everything."
Yes.
And that's very natural and normal in response to trauma. Why? Because I don't want to be blindsided ever again. I want to
Yep.
make sure that I am fully informed. Damn
I want
it.
to get ahead of those things.
Yeah, I got to get ahead of this.
Yeah.
It's very understandable.
So yeah, so weighing that out. So that's a great question, right? So definitely in this case, would you need to know the frequency? We would recommend that. Absolutely. How much time is he spending? Has he been spending money on it?
Hmm.
Some cases, again, emphasis on some cases, not all. It can be important for a partner to know if it's anybody that she knows. And
Yes.
that can be really tricky. Okay. So we're just saying that with a grain of salt, but something to consider. But outside of that, yeah, actually seeing the pictures and things like that, we have worked with many, many, probably thousands of spouses by this point between the two of us over the years. And I can count on one hand or less how many times that has worked in a spouse's favor seeing those pictures.
Yeah, nearly never.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So great question.
Yeah,
Okay.
really good question.
So let's keep moving
Hmm.
along. So we'll go to the next one. I can read this. Hello, Stephen Mark. Is it common for porn addicts to disrespect sexual touch boundaries? I love this question. This is a great question.
It's
And of
it's
course, when you bring it up and say stop slash put a boundary up, they gaslight and blame you for quote unquote their behavior. Examples would be, quote, you seemed inviting or you looked pretty, right? Unquote. My ex porn addict partner was working with a CSAT, and these behaviors started 9 months into his recovery process. And then she says, we had been together for nearly 3 years by this point. I told him no, and I placed a clear boundary, but he continued to repeat the behaviors hours later. So just within a few hours, he would go back to it. It
mm-hmm.
was shocking to me, and quite frankly, another betrayal. Our relationship dissolved shortly after. I couldn't trust him anymore. What are your thoughts? And what would your advice be for someone in this situation? Again, great,
Mm-hmm.
great question.
That is a great question. Yeah. And there's a few things here. Maybe Steve, I'll talk to the side of this with regard to the addict,
Sure.
and maybe you can talk about boundaries from the
Yeah.
side of a partner. So, and again, we don't know. We just have a little tiny glimpse into this situation. But if I were to try to kind of put a perspective to this, generally speaking, with regard to addict behavior, this is very common. And well, I'm just going to say it, and I'm going to put myself under the bus in this. One of the things that addiction does is it freezes the addict in some ways with regard to emotional maturity, depending on the age that he started into sexual addiction or sexual outlets. So, for example, for me, it started at about age 13. And I had a lot of tough stuff in my childhood, a lot of abuse, a lot of emotional trauma, a lot of stuff. And at age 13, I discovered that the escape to all of life's problems, a lot of them at home, was these sexual outlets. I accidentally discovered I lived in the pornography production capital of the world, San Fernando Valley, California. So it was all around me in the 70s, and I discovered masturbation by accident. Nobody told me about it, and once I discovered it, it was like the go-to place for soothing, escape, feeling something, so-called positive. It became my go-to place from that moment forward. Here's what happened to me. What happened was all of the problems and difficulties that life was throwing at me, I now found a way to completely step around them and escape totally. So I wasn't confronting difficult stuff. I wasn't learning the skills of emotional regulation, of how to have relationships with people, how to navigate difficult peer interactions. I skipped all of that and just went right around it because every time any of it would come up, I would go to my addiction outlets. And I did that not for just years, I did that for decades.
Mm.
Now, fast forward to this situation, for example, and now I'm in recovery, and I'm supposed to be learning how to navigate a healthy relationship with another individual, which includes boundaries. And you can see this guy in the description. She's saying, "Here's my boundary. Here's what's appropriate sexual touch, and I'm asking you not to step across that boundary to your old behaviors." And what did he do? It says within hours of her stating that, he stepped across the boundary and went back to his old behaviors. What do I see here? This guy needs more work with regard to his maturation process. He needs to start learning what common human respect looks like. He needs to start learning what boundaries are. He needs to start learning self-regulation and putting to the side these passions and desires, and instead respecting and bringing dignity into this interaction. He wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And 9 months, not nearly long enough to get to where I'm describing. It's a good
Yeah.
start, And kudos to him for working with a CSAP. But what I see here is he was still horribly immature.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating looking at the psychology of that. It's a common topic over at Dare to Connect where we look at some of the latest research about how the psychology of an addict is impacted by, kind of that corollary age of when things come up for many spouses. And this helped my spouse and Mark's spouse, and it helps a lot of the spouses we work with to understand kind of some of the things that happen. We talk to spouses all the time where they will say something along the lines of, Steve, I'm just mystified. I don't understand. Like, this man he's a productive, competent member of society. He holds down a job. He, is a prominent member in his company. He's a great dad in so many respects, da 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 da. But if I confront him about certain topics, it's like he turns into a 2-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he'll use conflict resolution skills that kind of sometimes equate to, shut up, stupid head, or whatever the case is. And again, Mark and I used to do this all the time. And it's frustrating for the addict because we wonder why we're doing it. And it's frustrating for a partner because, again, they just feel very unstable. Well, what the latest research is showing is that, like Mark indicated, that the brain actually stops developing in certain select ways when we start to discover these coping mechanisms. We don't start to grow and evolve in those conflict resolution skills because beginning at age 13 or whatever, we didn't have to resolve conflict anymore. We just masturbated, looked at porn, we sexed away our stuff,
Yep,
right?
we sidestepped the whole problem.
Yes, we didn't have to evolve. We didn't have to grow. Every time we came up against an obstacle, we just found a better way to numb it out while everybody was learning how to cope in healthy
Exactly.
ways. And
Yep.
so, what you have is a guy who, in literal fashion, that's what is going on in the brain. Literally, he will revert to his brain tries to access those conflict resolution skills, and they're not there.
Yeah.
So what happens, right? Or he tries to access those boundary skills or whatever, same thing, right? And so there's a real literal component to that.
So
With
this
reg-
is interesting in the chat thread. My husband is literally the opposite. Now, we would need some clarity about what that means.
yeah, we
Like,
need to know
is
more
she
about
saying her
that.
husband's like the uber example of complete, utter wise man at the top of the mountain maturity? And he's completely opposite what we're describing. So we're not sure what that means. So if you could put in the chat thread what you mean by that, we could perhaps address it.
Yeah. But while you're working on that, because we know there's also like a 13-second delay between the chat versus
We do.
what we're saying and what you see. So with that in mind, I'll kind of press on with the boundary side of this a little bit. In answer to this question, what are your thoughts? I mean, I think my first thoughts is it sounds like that was probably, again, this is just a cursory observation, not knowing any of the background, but I think Mark and I would both agree that I don't know that the relationship would have been workable staying in that situation.
Yeah.
One thing that we talked about yesterday on the live stream that we're going to carry over to today is that whatever else love is, love, this is a rule. Okay. This is a fundamental rule for life. Love is always boundaried. Whatever else it is, love will always be boundaried. Okay. If a relationship is lacking boundaries, there may be elements to that are loving, but real intimacy, real connection are going to be greatly lacking without those in place. And I know that that goes against every rom-com ever created, and those movies out there, they sell lots of movie tickets. They also do an absolutely abysmal job of teaching us all about what a quote unquote healthy relationship should look like. Um, the notion of like, I'll do anything for a partner, it's a bad notion. Again, it
Yeah.
sounds really cute, but if you look at any 80s R&B song, right? I'd die for you. No, we don't
Yeah.
do that.
You're the very air that I breathe.
Yeah, the air, the other, yeah. If you look at the wording behind a song like that, "You're the air that I breathe." That sounds like something a stalker would say, right? Like that's not healthy. It sounds romantic, but you think about all those little subliminal societal messages that we've all been raised with, and it flies in the face of what real love is. Real love will always require boundaries. It always functions within limits.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do we say? True love is boundaried love.
Yes,
It must be.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
If those aren't there, it's something else. Okay. Whether it's codependency or something different, it's something else.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it's tragic that a relationship has to end in that situation. But especially when we're talking about this particular boundary, because we will say that this is trauma is in the eye of the beholder, right? And even though this addict partner may not have intended this in any way, shape, or form, the fact that I'm with my wife, for example, the fact that I've been with my wife for now coming up on nearly 20 years doesn't give me license to my wife's body. It's an acknowledgement and agreement that one part of our relationship is a physical and sexual one, but that doesn't just give me unlimited dominion over my partner. That's the way that we look at it. And I can absolutely violate my partner in a sexual way. That's completely possible. If I'm
Hmm.
groping my wife or if I'm trying to be physical with her and she's telling me no, in my mind, I think in Mark's mind as well, that is no different than any other sort of sexual violation by somebody.
Yeah.
And I would never recommend someone stay in a relationship where that kind of thing was recurring. So I think that that is was probably the right call.
Yeah.
It's really sad that
Hmm.
it had to end that way, but I think for most people that would be a non-negotiable boundary.
I agree.
So,
Absolutely agree. So a couple things in
um,
the chat thread. It looks like Rebecca said, with regard to my husband, is literally the opposite of this. I don't understand. I always have to initiate. Kind of assuming what she means by she always has to initiate is,
so he's like hyposexual. He's not
either
engaging.
that or from the emotional side, he doesn't get in her face. He doesn't, blow up and do little child temper tantrums. It sounds to me like he does what I used to do. My wife called this my stoic mode. Mark would just go stoic, silent, shut down, non-interactive. I wouldn't get in her face and throw a child tantrum. I just wouldn't do anything. I just go like a stone.
Mm,
And that also is a very immature approach to a human relationship. I just learned early on, it was part of my addiction disappearing act. I would also do that emotionally in human relationships where I would just shut down and just disappear inside myself. I
yeah.
just detach.
Well, it
Not going
looks
to deal with
like
this at all. Done, gone.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Rebecca, she did clarify he has never grew up. So yeah, so it sounds like he's not initiating very often. And
Gotcha.
unfortunately, we don't have time to go over that. There's a whole complex psychology behind that, why addicts will seemingly become hypersexual and then oscillate to hyposexual in different scenarios. I wish we had time to get into that today. Not to plug it too obviously, but get yourself into Dare to Connect. We'd love to talk about it more. But there is a whole element behind that. And Rebecca and those who may find yourself in that same place, it may sound confusing, but you'd actually be shocked how many guys struggle with that same thing, right? They will oscillate between those extremes.
Well,
So
and one of the things that happens is and this is not often used with guys, but it probably should be. Guys who have quote sexual addiction, you would think this is crazy, but can often be sexually anorexic.
yes,
So someone would say, "Well, wait a second. They're looking at sexual things, they're masturbating. How can they be sexually anorexic while doing all those other things?" This is when we often say, which can sound very confusing to those who don't have experience, sex addiction is not about sex. Porn is not about sex. It's about escape. It's about numbing out. It's about taking no risks. It's about not having to do the hard work of relationship connection. It's about just going to, my mentor, my original mentor used to call it climax theater. He said, imagine you go to movies or sporting events, and the only thing that you want to see is the winning shot or the last climactic scene of the movie. You don't want to bother with all the lead up or all the rest of it. You just go for a climactic, climactic, climactic. What does that do? It turns you into someone who doesn't know how to initiate real intimacy, who doesn't know how to be romantic, who's either lost the skill or never developed it. And so I know that sounds like a paradox where they're just polar opposite, but it really gets to the heart of when we say in order to treat sexual addiction, porn addiction, you've got to get below the symptoms and start to peel back that layer and get down to the deeper issues.
yeah. Generally, I guess a good way to kind of sum that up because we got to move on to other questions. But generally speaking, what we see is that guys, and again, we speak from personal experience with this. When I was in addict mode, not to brag, but I was awesome at sex. I was terrible at intimacy. I was great at having sex. I mean, I was well educated, quote unquote, in all the ways to quit, quote unquote, just have sex, but actually connecting with my partner, no, sir.
And what do we always say? Sex and intimacy are not the same thing.
No, they
I
are
can
not.
I can engage in sex and completely be outside the realm of intimacy.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we will press on here, just keeping an eye to the time. So we'll move on to the next question. Great questions, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next one. Hi, Stephen Mark. I'm an addict in recovery, and so we love this. This was one of only two questions we got from addict partners, which we loved. The first one we couldn't take because it was like five questions in one, and we never could
Yeah,
have
that
covered
was
it all. But we
very
wanted to
long.
make sure we included this one. I'm an addict in recovery, and one of the hardest things I've experienced in my journey is no longer having that quote unquote dopamine rush I experienced with porn. I feel like the only thing that can substitute my porn addiction is another addiction, which I know isn't healthy. I've been trying to replace my life with healthy activities like journaling, exercise, connection with my partner, and attending SA meetings, but that dopamine urge is still lurking. If you two have any advice on what works for you to help substitute/combat that urge for that dopamine hit, I'd greatly appreciate it. I
Mm,
have a ton to say about this. So, Mark,
I
you want to lead
I do
out?
as well. I'll tell you what this. I'll tell you one thing that this immediately hit me with. So I was a co-owner and a director in a substance abuse rehab facility for about 7 or 8 years. And one of the things that would happen with those who would come in with substance abuse issues, imagine someone that in order to deal with life, anytime it gets hard, anytime it gets difficult, they immediately, for example, would go to heroin. And if anyone has any experience with heroin, you know that it's an incredible drug of choice that people say nothing in the world can compare to the high that you get when you use it. And so what would happen to these individuals is they would come into recovery and they would share with us that they were getting some advice from others. Hey, I'm just going to say this for, hey, dude, you just need to get up early and sit in a yoga pose and just watch the sun come up, and that will replace your heroin.
Mm,
And that approach is absolutely preposterous. It's outrageous. There's no way early on or even in midterm recovery that many things are going to be able to compare, quote, to that heroin high. Why is that? Because in addiction with substances, or especially, for example, pornography or sexual outlets, we rewire our dopamine system. So how does that work? I'm going for the high and releasing massive dopamine into my system to medicate me from hard life, to escape, to numb out, to feel good. And when I elevate my dopamine system to that level, I'm doing something to my brain that it was not intended to do. Think of it as pushing the gas pedal on the engine to the floor and just holding it there. Right? You can't run an engine that way without causing damage if you keep going to that place. That's what happens to the human brain when I put the pedal to the metal on my dopamine system over and over and over again. I rewire my dopamine system. And what does the brain do to compensate for that? It does two things. It lowers the amount of dopamine that it will release when I take my heroin or go to my porn. It releases less, and it takes the whole dopamine system and dials it down as a whole, so I don't get the same response from what I'm taking in when I go use. So I use more. I go to different kinds of pornography. I spend greater amounts of time in my sexual outlets. I seek for more novelty. Right? I'm always expanding the envelope of dopamine release, and my brain's working to do just the opposite, because pedal to the metal brain activity is literally killing me over time. And the brain, to protect itself, will dial that whole system down. Now, what happens when I get into recovery? What used to be a 10 level activity on the dopamine scale that used to really give me a high and fulfillment, that is now a 2. And I have to have crazy, wild stuff to even get the brain to register on its dopamine scale. So what do you think going into a yoga pose and watching a sunrise is going to do for me on my rewired dopamine scale in early recovery? Nothing. It's going to do nothing. So it's important we understand that we can't, quote, replace that high that we've been experiencing. So what do we need to do? We need to understand that this is a step-by-step journey. I need to have a support system in place, have a whole set of tools for when these strong urges hit, so that I can move through them with the help of others and give my dopamine system a chance to rewire. And that's the hope. It will. Your dopamine system in addiction, it will come back to normal levels. It just takes time and patience and tapping into your support system and slowly letting it make its way back until those simple daily pleasures will become enough. And in fact, will supersede those old artificial highs. Real life will become better than the old addiction life, but it takes time. It takes time to get to that place.
Well, I'll add a couple of things to this because Mark, I think, has given a good base here. Something to kind of consider is, in addition, is well, and just to build off initially what Mark just said, there are activities out there that, for example, can help to retrain the brain's dopamine system.
Yes.
One of the ones that are clinically proven to work, that I always use with clients in my office, is exercise.
Yes.
Um, Dopamine hits from addictive or recurrently addictive behavior. If you were to kind of map it out on a graph, it sort of like the pulses on a heartbeat monitor, right? You'll get these massive dumps, these huge lows, and then, in between, kind of these periods of acting out versus not. Exercise, specifically aerobic exercise, for example, has been clinically proven to, rather than having these huge up and down swings, what you get, like, for example, when somebody goes running, is you have this gradual dopamine release by the brain. A person experiences what some refer to as the runner's high. And then when the running session is over, that gradually decreases. So you have a nice smooth bell curve of release rather than these massive jolts. Okay, so that's one thing
Yes.
to kind of tie with that. I'll share with you something that hopefully this will give you a concrete tool because I hope this guy is listening. It looks like this is somebody's Courtney's husband in the chat. Courtney's husband. So I'll just walk you through an exercise real quick that we do sometimes on Dare to Connect and that I've been doing with clients for years. I will sit down with a client and I will oftentimes sit down with him and I will say, okay, so I'm a big whiteboard guy. So I'll say, okay, so outside of the actual orgasm, what do you like about that sexual release on an emotional level? And so what we'll do is we'll start to break down, well, when I act out, even though emotionally I know it's a counterfeit, I feel loved.
Mm,
Or we'll talk about the thrill. I mean, I'm an addict. I can reference with this really well. There was a real thrill component to trying to get around filters, for example. I used to get a real high before the high by being like little Mr. Hacker Mission Impossible, seeing if I could circumvent things I'd put on my computer. So there's the thrill factor that's involved. There is the pleasure factor that's involved. There's the being wanted or needed and there's a whole list of other things. And for every guy that's unique. So once we will make that list, usually it's about 10 things. I will look at that with a guy and I will say, okay. And when we look at that, what we see in most cases, when you look at that list of wanting to be wanted, wanting to have excitement in your life, the things on that list are not bad, right? Those things in and of itself, those are things that the average person wants. Everybody wants to be wanted. Everybody wants to have excitement. Everybody wants to have these different things, right? The key is that one, we've got to reduce that over dependency, like Mark talked about, right? To those things to navigate life all the time. And the second is that we need to find ways to access those same feelings, those same and get that same experience through non-destructive means, either to the self or to the relationship.
exactly.
So I'll give you an
Exactly.
example of a guy that I worked with right out of prison. I loved this guy, was awesome. He was like the coolest guy ever. He came out of a drug addiction program out of prison, was this hardcore addict, but really, really nice guy. And we were meeting together, and we were working on this very thing. He worked as an oil mechanic for an oil change company because that was one of the few things he could do with his record. And he was single. He would save all of his money from the week outside of his basic necessities. And all of his money, you don't make tons of money doing that, but he was able to scrimp and save so that every other weekend he would go skydiving without a shirt,
Without a shirt.
specifically. And if it was cold weather, the better for him. He loved doing that. And he would talk about, exactly, for me, this gives me some of the same, in a healthy way, some of that same old thrill. He's like, I feel like I'm investing in myself, but in a healthy way. He's like, for me, it's adventure and it's excitement. And I love the thrill of jumping out of that plane and, being with my buddies. He's like, I used to get high with my buddies. And so he listed all these healthy corollaries, right, with all the old things he used to do. And that was his self care. He would save all week for 2 weeks at a shot so he could throw himself out of a plane for 5 minutes every other week. And he loved it.
And what you'll notice with that is he wasn't using that as an escape from all of life.
Exactly.
He was still working recovery. He was still facing difficult conversations. He was still engaging in confrontations with people. He was still facing his negative emotions and all the stuff. But he did have a reward in life. He did have something to look forward to. I would assume, well, I know because I have a son who is a recovering alcoholic, and he uses skydiving as his outlet. And
Oh, I
there's
didn't know that.
wonderful parts of it because he's an avid skydiver. There's tons of preparation he has to do to be
Yes.
safe as he skydives. There's collaboration with other people who are on in the ground facility getting ready to go up in the plane.
It's
There's
researching the latest equipment, right? I
he
mean, it's like all those
tons,
things.
all those things. It's been so healthy for him.
Yeah.
And so he does, Steve. He actually did look at a list. What are all the things that my alcohol has done for me? Many of them being legitimate. I have human needs. I know for me, there are lots of things about my past sexual porn addiction that delivered to me legitimate human needs that I had. It's just it was being done in escape and escaping in destructive ways.
Well, and the other part of it was, of course, that it never lasted, right? Because it
It
was
never
synthetic.
lasted.
We weren't
Yeah,
meeting the real needs. We were just artificially trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
exactly. Now, questions come up in the chat thread. Is it possible when we get over one addiction to replace it with others? And the answer to that is absolutely yes.
For sure. Anything can become an addiction,
So some are
right?
saying, what about video games? It's one of the key things that I have dealt with guys I've helped come out of porn and sex addiction. And now they start just replacing it with a video game addiction. Very
Totally.
common.
I
I've,
was a I was a total video game addict for years and years and years, guys. It was a total cross addiction for me, and it's something that we talk about actually in Dare to Connect quite
we
a
do
bit.
talk about it.
Because
Many of
I
these
finally, after a decade, have learned to have a healthy relationship with them.
healthy,
There's a whole
lots of
process to that,
lots
but
of the same kinds of neuroscience or brain science and psychology aspects of gaming actually unfortunately match up to the same things with regard
yes,
to pornography. I have a lot of clients where they get sober from porn and sex addiction, and now what happens? They put on massive amounts of weight. Why? Because food becomes their replacement, and then we have to work through all the aspects of that as being their escape. So
yeah, I think that
yes,
for most of us, none of us would want to look too closely at our eating habits, at least here in the States. I think a shocking amount of us might be approaching an addiction-like state, right? Not all addiction is created equal, but anything can become an addiction, right? And it's actually I'm really glad that the video game question came up because recovery for an addict in a process addiction, which is something which sex would be one, food is another, right? These are process these are different than like a chemical addiction, right? Chemical addiction is an artificially introduced addiction. Unless you were an alcohol baby, like or you were born to a parent who was already addicted to a substance. People do not come born into the world addicted to sex or addicted to food. Those are learned traits and behaviors, and they can be unlearned. But they are some of the hardest habits to break because it involves a pre-existing biological process, right?
exactly.
And so breaking free of sex addiction, the solution there is not to become a eunuch, chop your testicles off and ride off into the sunset. That's not the solution. The solution is frankly, it's much easier for drug addicts and chemical addicts in one regard. And I had an addict tell me this one day. I had a chemical addict who was addicted to heroin and also addicted to sex. We were working in my office, and he said, "This is like having a dealer in your pants all the time." He's like, "I have to go out and make effort to score to go get my heroin." He's like, "This is just accessible constantly."
Yep.
And so the journey is possible, but it very much is different because it doesn't mean doing what a chemical addict does, which is scorched earth policy. Don't ever do your substance ever again, ever under any circumstance. It means doing something harder. It means learning to develop a healthy relationship with food, with your sexuality, right? With those kinds of things. And again, these are all things that we can't cover here, but work on in Dare to Connect all the time. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Let's
we,
go to
we
the
better
next
keep moving on.
one.
Great questions, though. We absolutely love these. So
You
yeah,
can,
so just to close up that last question to this gentleman, look for healthy alternatives that you can engage in that are non-addictive that can meet some of those same needs, right?
yep.
Those
Yep.
needs be most of the needs behind every addict that we work with, contrary to what they think, they're not. crazy. They're not perverts. They're not deviants. They want the same thing that everybody else wants. But to quote that country song, they're looking for love in all the wrong places. Right. And so
And
it's about
a mistake
finding
that's made
healthy
by us
ways.
as addicts is we declare war on those old behaviors and make them the enemy, where what has really been happening over all the years or decades is we were seeking for to meet legitimate deep needs just in very destructive ways.
Yes.
So don't throw the needs out with all the rest of it. Say, what are those needs? Those are really legitimate. This is, and I've been meeting them through this destructive means. Now I just need to look at the same needs and match them up to healthy ways of meeting those,
Non-compulsive ways of meeting them.
non-compulsive ways,
Non-destructive. Yeah.
non-dependent ways. Yeah, love that.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to this next one. Mark, you wanna read this thing? Very short, but
Yeah.
poignant.
Oh man, is there a way to know when to leave? What switch in my brain needs to flip for me to be able to leave and to be okay? Wow. Yeah, boy, how many times have we been asked this over the decades, Steve? A ton, a ton, a ton. This
Yeah.
is very short, two very short questions, but boy, is this deep.
Very complicated answers to this.
So let me let me address this by saying something that's Steve and I we spend a lot of time and Dare to Connect on this issue I'm about to share. If I were to reword this a little bit, I would say, is there a way to know what is authentic and genuine and honoring me? Is there a way to know where that line is? Is there a way for me to shift from being codependent in ways, deemed dysfunctional, feeling stuck, feeling like I can't leave? Is there a way to switch from that and go to what is truly authentic and healthy and genuine and true for me as an individual? And can I live in that place as opposed to the place I'm in right now? That's how I would kind of reword that.
Hmm.
What do healthy boundaries look like? What does speaking my truth sound like? What does standing my healthy ground? How do I shift into the place that I'm now describing versus where I am today? Now we say that, when do I know when to leave? And I would say, when do I know what is authentic and when to hold and enforce that? That's kind of, this is such a big category.
Yeah. I'll give some of my thoughts on this. I have a policy in my office when I'm working with clients. Clients pay me in mark for our time. And with one exception, and that exception being physical abuse, or sexual abuse, which is a subset of physical abuse. I don't, as a general rule, recommend that clients leave or not leave a relationship. And the reason for that is not because I may not have an opinion on it, but even as a therapist, as somebody who's working with somebody one on one, sometimes for years, I, first of all, am not going to be the one who is going to live with the long term implications of ending or staying in that relationship. Second of all, um, even knowing that a client as well as I do, only that person, I think, understands the nuances, the pros and the cons of that relationship and how that staying in and enduring or being present with certain deficits versus assets in the relationship truly feels to them. Because what I would say, and I like where Mark went with this, we talk a lot in Dare to Connect about this concept of the authentic self. Many of you have heard us talk about it on the podcast as well. And essentially, the authentic self is an amalgam of who am I today, truly, deep down, coupled with who am I trying to become.
Yes.
And whatever else a relationship with a partner in life should be, is it should be something that is facilitating to some degree a path along my journey to being my authentic self in a way that allows me to be a support to my partner in pursuing that dream for them and for them to be doing that with me.
Mm-hmm.
And with every partner that we work with, there is a tipping point, right? Where the quote unquote cons of that relationship, the trauma, the lack of accountability, the repeated hurt, the deception, right? The all of the things that cause problems in a relationship as a result of addiction. For every partner, there is a tipping point where those pros, you know, are outweighed by the cons. But that is a complicated game, and it becomes even more complicated for those partners here. And we know that there are some of you here who have children involved, because now you have a whole new layer of complication involved. And it's not just, is it healthy for the kids to be around, right? It's the financial considerations of everything from divorce to two separate incomes to two separate living situations, and what's that going to cost? I mean, it's very, very complicated. But what we would say, and what I do tell clients, is that you have to be able to be you and a thriving version of you in a relationship in order for it to work. That's kind of the overall master litmus test, I think, when it comes to staying in a relationship. If I can't be me in this relationship, to me personally, this is gospel according to Steve, the cost of staying is too high,
Yeah.
right? If I can't be me, then the cost of staying is too high. And so it's a hard one to answer. CCB, which is one of our mods, which we greatly appreciate, her and Sparkler 36 or 69, I couldn't remember which one it is. Stephen Mark, you've said that if leaving is the right decision today, it will be the right decision tomorrow and the next. Thank you for that reminder. We do talk about that quite a bit, right? The decision to leave is something that is made over time. Okay. With rare exception. Again, if this is like an abusive, physical or sexual abusive situation, safety becomes paramount. Get the hell out of there. End of discussion. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
But when it comes to, am I going to leave a relationship with all these factors? You can't afford to allow either your traumatized brain or your overly hopeful brain to be the one making that sole decision, right? The decision, what we do encourage spouses to do is very much what CCB is talking about, is sometimes it is a question of making that journey on a day by day basis when you get up in the morning, looking yourself in the mirror as part of your check in or part of your journaling, part of your daily self care, and saying, and being real with yourself, asking, because this is a scary question to even ask for some, do I want to be married today or not? Or do I want to be in this relationship today or why or why not? And if the answer is yes, explore a little bit as to why. If the answer is no, explore a little bit as to why. And then you keep asking yourself that question, coupled with observation of how your partner responds to those needs as you vocalize them.
Yeah.
Yeah, are they responsive? Are they adaptive to it? Do they have the capacity to empathize? Are they demonstrating some sort of willingness or capability to change? Right? All of those pieces of information are valuable in determining that next day. And we encourage clients never to leave based on one day of like, I want out, right? I think everyone on planet Earth, if we're being honest, I love my wife more than anything. She's the most amazing woman in the world. I would be lying through my teeth if I said that she and I don't have various days where it's just like, oh my gosh, that person is driving me batshit nuts. Gosh, right? Everybody has days like that. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter how we have an amazing marriage, but it's when those start to stack up over the course of weeks, and it's not a reactive response. It starts to feel more authentic, right? That's when we start to look at it. Another thing that I would say is if you find yourself in a place where you are seriously questioning leaving, and you're to that point where, for example, you might be initiating a divorce. I'm a big believer that, again, be careful with this advice because take it with a grain of salt. This is not individual therapy. This is a group podcast. But when I work with clients in that situation, I tell them to take one step into the darkness and see how it feels. Look up divorce lawyers today and pay attention to how that feels as you're looking. Does that feel authentic to you? As you're looking up the numbers, as you make some phone calls, as you are checking out rates, how does that feel to you? What emotions does it bring up for you? Does it speak to your truth or does it not? Right. And if it speaks to your truth, then what would be another small step to take? Right. This so often the brain wants to make a black or white decision. Okay, that's it. We're divorcing and we're going forward. Right. That's usually not how important decisions like this ought to be made.
Yeah.
Right.
What,
Because
what do we say to addicts? Don't make life altering decisions until you have at least 1 year of sobriety.
yes, correct.
You
Yeah.
don't want to be doing things in that mindset. I could, if my wife were here right now, I know her so well, and we've talked about this so much. I can offer to you what she would say. Some people have asked her, why did you stay with him all those decades? Now, I'm different
Hmm.
than Steve. I brought my addiction into my marriage at a young age, and my wife did not know. And I kept it
Hmm.
hidden from her for probably 15 to 20, the first 15 to 20 years of our marriage. Now she's very intuitive. She knew something was wrong. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she intuited that things weren't right. And when she found out, she hung in beyond that point for at least another decade for me to get my act together. We're talking 30 years for this woman. And people say, why would you stick around?
Mm.
And I'll tell you what she would tell you if she were sitting here right now. She'd say a couple of things. I always knew that deep inside there, he was a good man. Said I could see it. It's what attracted to me to him originally. I knew he was in there someplace. And she said, and this was always true for him, she said, and I knew that he was trying. I was always trying, even though it was sometimes ridiculously clumsy and pathetic. I never gave up. And I was doing it a lot of the wrong ways for a very long time. I was fighting this addiction in most of the wrong ways, but at least I was trying. So she said, I knew you were a good person deep down. I knew you were trying. And she said, and then I began to establish my own boundaries. I wasn't going to take charge of your recovery for you. I was going to let you own your side of the street and me own my side of the street. And I was going to live a happy, fulfilling life. And I was willing to support you in the ways that I could and look to you to evolve and mature and come around. And she said, I was willing to wait for that guy that I knew was in there. She said, but I wasn't willing to wait indefinitely.
Mm.
Wasn't willing to wait forever, but I was willing to wait. And she got to decide what that meant. And for her, it meant 30 years. Right? Which is like, what? I mean, this woman should be exalted. Yeah, without question. But see, that was the thing for her. Now we have 6 children. That was a big part of the component. She was always a stay-at-home mom, so there was a big financial component. There's a big spiritual component here for how we both feel about the vows of marriage. There's a lot of issues going on here. But that was it for her. That doesn't mean that approach was right for someone else. For someone else, 2 years in may have been the authentic decision. I'm done, not
Yeah.
30. So there's a very personalized decision about this.
For sure. Nikki K says, how do you know if he's given up on us or if he's still fighting?
Mm.
And again, complicated question. And I know we've got more to cover and we got to wrap this up so we can let you guys go and get to your Saturdays. We so appreciate you having you here. But if I was just to give a real quick response to that, the proof is in the pudding, right? It is kind of a by their fruits, you will know them sort of scenario. Addicts are really good, just being candid with you, at talking a good game. We tend to be master manipulators. We're just really good at that. You don't get to be a full-fledged adult with a part-time addiction as a part-time job without getting really good at justifying it, minimizing it, pulling the wool over people's eyes, etc. But at
Yep.
the end of the day, the thing that cannot be faked are two things. One is action. Okay. And so that is he following through? Is he being consistent? And the other one that we're telling clients a lot these days, because this is even more difficult to fake, speaking from experience, is insight. Okay, you attended your recovery meeting. Awesome. What did you learn? Because I work with a lot of guys who will check the box and say they attended a recovery meeting. And what that means is that that's code for they sat in the back of the room and played Angry Birds on their phone for an hour and a half. Right? That may be checking the box, but okay, you journaled today. What did you write? You say you love me today. Why? What do you appreciate about me today? What's something today that you realized in your recovery that you found valuable about us?
Yeah,
About why you want to choose us
you
today?
just got honest finally and reported to me that you had a slip or a relapse. But did you just report to me that you had that, or did you do the work to determine why you got into that place? And are you ready to show the plan you're going to use so that the outcome's different next time?
Yeah. Walk me through how you feel that is hurtful to me. How do you feel that that relapse has impacted us? In what ways has it impacted us? And if he can't say something more than, will it hurt our relationship? That's a problem.
Right?
Then that's where you lovingly say, I think you need to get into Dare to Connect, or you need to go back and talk to your sponsor, or you need to get in with your therapist, or you need to get in with you need to be doing some more recovery, because that's an easy answer. That's like saying prayer in church. It's kind of a 50-50 shot of being right.
My wife's phrase to me when she got really confident and standing in her truth, she would look at me and say, talk is cheap, show me.
Exactly. Exactly. And I know most of the wives listening to this can resonate with that full fledged, right? For a lot of spouses, they will oftentimes tell us, and again, many of you can probably resonate with this. When he starts talking, that actually triggers me more. I don't want to hear one more, I'm sorry. I don't want to hear one more apology. I just want to see it freaking different.
Yep.
I don't want to hear one more thing. Don't handle me. Don't manage me. As my wife told me one time, I'm not your client. Don't therapize me.
It's so true.
Freaking don't explain it to me. Change. Okay, well, we got one more question to go, but before we do that, Mark and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our Dare to Connect program for just 2 seconds and do a quick plug for that. Many of you saw in the chat a couple of minutes ago, I put one in there because I neglected to do it earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and do it again right now. There's a link here to get that half off of your first month of Dare to Connect plus a 2-week free trial for that. And we just wanted to tell you a little bit about that. So I'll start us off and Mark can fill in the gaps, and then we'll get to this last question. We'll let you ladies go. And gentlemen, if you're attending as well, we honor all of you who are here today. So Dare to Connect was created about 2.5 years ago. There's not a program on planet Earth, as far as Mark and I understand, quite like it. Dare to Connect is a live service, which means that it is a real, in the trenches, non-static, meet you where you're at program. We have designed Dare to Connect specifically to meet addicts, spouses, and couples uh, where they're at in real time. The content that we cover in Dare to Connect usually rotates in a general sense about once a month or so. And even though we do change those topics up regularly, during each session during the week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for addicts, partners, and couples, respectively, uh, even though we will address through various diagrams, concepts, and assignments, all things related to that topic. For example, we just have wrapped up a couple of months on shame and betrayal trauma, and this next month is going to be about thinking errors. We start that on Monday, and we've got some cool stuff lined up for that already. Um, Even though we do cover those topics, we also take questions from our subscribers on a day-to-day basis, and we'll address those in the next coming up session, because we've designed Dare to Connect to not only be a general resource for recovery, but also as a way for you to have access to two therapists who are also addicts in recovery for a fraction of the cost of what therapy costs. My hourly rate, and Mark's, I believe, is the same right now, which is $150 an hour, which is actually quite low compared to the industry standard, depending where you live in the United States. And Dare to Connect, the program without a discount, is $295 a month and incorporates over 30 hours of content for that time. We wanted to extend this special offer to all of you to be able to give something like that a shot if you see the potential for that being a help for leveling your relationship up and taking it to the next level. We have couples who enrolled in our program who have been where the addict has 2 days of sobriety, and we have people in there who have literally been sober for over 3 years. And each of those couples or groups are finding benefit from the program because it has the capacity to meet you where you're at. In addition to that live content that comes every week, we also have a 12-step integrated support group for addicts and for partners that are separate, facilitated every weekend on Sundays, which kind of builds in further into the community. We have it once a month. We have weekly open mic weeks, is what we call them, where now, as of this week, thanks to some new upgrades, you can actually come on the program live, talk with Mark and I in real time, like you would in a therapist's office, and actually go through issues or problems that your relationship is facing, whether it's tied to the monthly topic or not. Um, we've done our very best to make something that is unique and not quite like anything else out there. And we think that we're doing a good job of fulfilling that vision of giving you access to top quality care, like I said, at a fraction of the cost, because those of you who have done the work know that finding a therapist you trust is hard. Finding one you can afford is even harder. And getting in with that person is almost impossible, especially in real time. So, with that in mind, we hope that that's something that you will consider if you're looking to take your recovery to the next level. Like I said, there's a link we put in the chat there a couple of times. Now that if you'll have to use that link to get access to that discount, and it does expire on the 31st at the end of the month. We've never done a discount like this to any group ever in the history of Dare to Connect. This is a first time thing, and I don't see us doing it anytime soon with anyone else. So, We wanted to extend that to you, but we do hope that's something you'll give a look to and consider. Mark, do you have anything to
Well,
add?
someone said, "Well, I work during the week," and we actually have a
Oh,
lot
thank you. Yes.
of people who participate who can't come to the live sessions. That's okay. We record every one of them, except for the support groups on Sundays because those are you're participating live via voice in those, so we don't record those. But every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday session, those are all recorded, and we have some addicts and partners and couples who just listen to the recorded sessions. They often listen to them together.
Probably about half our audience is that, I would
Probably
say.
half the audience listens to them together, talks about the assignments together, and they literally have this recovery and healing track individually and as a couple that the whole thing walks them through, even though it's just recorded. And they have the opportunity to send questions through to us directly. So even though they can't be there live, we answer those questions that they send in during the live sessions, and then they listen to the recordings where their questions are answered. So
Yes,
it is possible to do it remote, even if you can't be there live.
absolutely. In fact, what I'll do just really quick here is just for 2 seconds, just to give you guys an idea of this. I will share my current screen and just show you what the new website we just launched a whole new section to this looks like here. Mark, can you see that okay?
Yep, I do see it.
So what you've got here is this is the actual interface where you can access, for example, the recorded sessions that Mark is talking about. The latest session was one on Friday where again we did a huge product launch with all new features to the program, and here are the past recorded sessions you can access. We have a whole housing of assignments and handouts that Mark and I have created personally that are available for download for you. More often than not, just about every session, if not at least every other session, you will be getting an assignment and or a new diagram showing everything from on topics again ranging from betrayal trauma to shame resiliency to the addiction cycle to everything in between. And it's unique content that Mark and I spent a ton of time creating during the week, all for their benefit. The newest launch in Dare to Connect are these new self-study courses, which are a brand new thing. They are going to be based on seniority within the program. The first course that we're launching will begin February 1st. It's for people who've been in the program for 6 months or longer, which, as far as we know, Mark and I, is the first ever attempt to do an actual live video course on a formal disclosure process. I don't know of any other CSAT or anyone else who's ever even attempted that, and probably for good reason. There's more to come on that, but we're going to have courses on healthy sexuality that are again side content that you can access in addition to the daily, weekly sessions and all that recorded stuff. We have a whole housing of what we call the DDC Vault, which is just a bunch of static videos and resources that we record and keep permanently housed in our site that you can access. And we would encourage you to be able to access those at any time, covering all sorts of topics ranging from you can just see here skill sets like taking a break, couples basics, how to do a check-in with each other. These are all things that Mark and I cover in real time, as you can see. So there's a whole list of things that are available to Dare to Connect. Again, we launched all these new attributes and things just the other day. I don't know what we were thinking doing this and that at the same time, but we did, and we're just really excited for all the new things coming, and it does coincide well with this. So if that is something that you are looking to do, if you are looking to get many, if not most, of the benefits of individual therapy at a fraction of the cost, please come over, join us, see what you think. Again, with that special discount we have in place, you're looking at $145 for 6 weeks to give you a real shot to just immerse yourself in all the content and see what you think about it.
You go back to our normal screen share, Steve.
Yeah, so I don't have that infinity view.
There you go. There we go.
So let me go back and take that. So anyway, we appreciate all of you being here for this and for letting us join you. We know that you guys can be anywhere. Again, it's a Saturday morning, and the fact that you're here, whether you're recorded or especially live, that kind of makes you like the SEAL Team 6 of the recovery world. I mean, not many people
Does.
would do that.
Yeah.
So
Good
we're
work.
just grateful for all of you. And anyway, that's kind of all we've got to. Do you have anything else you want to add, Mark?
I don't think we're going to look to have last night's session and this one available to all of you.
Yes.
We're working with your moderators to make sure that we have that so that
That'll take a few days to do, but I can have that to you guys. We'll have that up hopefully by Monday. So
yeah. So we're going to look at how to do that.
yeah.
But yeah.
So,
So
okay. Well, with that in mind, thank you again for your patronage. I'll go ahead and throw that in here one more time, the link for that, just in case you missed it. And we will jump to the next question. So last question. We'll
Last
knock
question.
this thing
Finish
out and
up.
get you guys back to your
And
families.
it's the
Okay.
last one. Wow.
All right. I will read this. Well, Mark, do you want to read it? This is a long
Sure.
one.
Where do we even go from here? My partner's been in recovery for 2 years with no relapses. In the beginning, he was a compulsive liar who would regularly give inconsistent or contradictory answers and information. I included for him a list of information that I needed disclosed in order to feel like I could move forward. He said he would work on it. He remained in good recovery, but never provided me the disclosure. By the time he was in a place where he could be honest about it, he said he couldn't remember anything I was asking about. He has made huge strides, but I feel stuck and like I will never move forward without that information. I regularly break down and have panic attacks thinking of the questions that will never be answered and what those answers might have been. It's the first and last thing in my mind every day for over a year now. I struggle with suicidal ideation over this, and I simultaneously want to hold on to the new person my partner is and run away because I know I'll never really be okay without this thing he is incapable of providing me. Wow.
That is a mouthful.
Wow. First of all, our hearts go out to this partner, and
Yes.
we absolutely legitimize and say what you're going through is normal. It's a big part of betrayal trauma. Whenever we have, quote, the past that we have generally been made aware of, but we're not being provided with the details, that wreaks havoc on the traumatized brain. So what she describes here is we see it all the time. And so a few things I would say. First of all, if in her place, I would not, quote, give up on this simply because he says he can't remember now. She's obviously expressing her authentic self here. This is important. This is not just important, it's crucial to me. It's crucial to my healing. It's crucial to my moving forward. So she needs to hold that boundary and not just let it go because he's digging in his heels on this. And from the addict side, and again, we don't know the specific scenario about this, but I know what this would have been for me. I would have purposely elongated this entire process to hopefully get to the place where the details my wife was asking for would sort of fade into the distance. The longer I can put between her original questions and when I'm going to actually come forward to answer them, the longer period of time I could cause that to be, maybe the less she would have cared about it, or the less she needs to know. And why did I do that? Because I was terrified of actually answering those questions about my addict self and my behaviors of the past. I did not want to bring those out into the bright spotlight. In fact, I had an attitude. I would disclose certain things, but there were certain other things that I was, quote, going to take to the grave. There was no way that I was ever going to let those be known. Why? Because I was terrified of, quote, being seen, of allowing my whole self, the good, the bad, the ugly, to be seen in the bright sunlight. It just terrified me. And such a thing terrified me from the time I was a small child, to be seen. And I'm just going to say to any guys listening, guys, a huge part of true recovery, true moving into healthy living, healthy relationships, finally moving into our true higher selves is a willingness to be seen. And we know it's terrifying. We know that it absolutely horrifies you to bring these things out into the light, but you've got to in order to truly heal in your recovery and help your partner heal. Now, is there a possibility that this guy maybe doesn't remember some of the details? That's definitely a possibility. But I guarantee that he can remember sufficient about past behaviors to put together a disclosure about them. Sitting here today, I can remember stuff that I did when I was 13 years old. I can't tell you all the details, but I can give you a general description of what happened and what I was doing without question.
Yeah.
So I know I'm sounding forceful on this, but I feel pretty strongly about this as guys in recovery. We cannot use this "I don't remember" as an excuse. It's just not acceptable.
Well, if Mark sounds forceful, then get ready. I I tend to get a little passionate about topics like this. we do have all the empathy. And I mean, Mark and I are addicts in recovery. For any guys that are listening, look, man, we get you. If this spouse happens to be listening, we get it. The thought of when Mark says that we would have rather died than disclose some of these things, that's not a facetious statement. That's not a statement we're saying for like to be, whatever that's called, like kind of representative of seriousness. That is a literal statement.
Nope, I would rather have died than let people know
I
these
mean, that's
things.
the truth,
Yeah.
right? It was terrifying to be known. Probably the biggest thing that every addict that I've ever worked with that they're most scared of is being known. We are caught in a never-ending, self-perpetuating trap of being desperate to connect with people because we're wired that way as human beings, but never being able to because of our own shame, inadequacy, and lack of self-worth. And we are caught in that never-ending cycle. Mark and I did it for 20 to 40 years each, depending on who you're talking about.
We're desperate to connect, but we're terrified to do what it takes.
Yes. All right. As the 12-step white book from Sexaholics Anonymous says, our insides never matched the outsides of what we showed to others.
Yes.
And so we can really, really connect with that. But we will also tell you, hands down, if you cannot expose your full self, and it takes time and it's not easy to do, but if you can't expose yourself to your full self to your relationship, to whatever degree you choose to or not do that, you determine the glass ceiling of the level of intimacy that you will have in your marriage
Yep.
or in your committed relationship.
Transparency and intimacy go together.
It's emotional math, guys. There's no way to circumvent it. You are talking to two gentlemen who spent 60 years between the two of us trying to find that mythical holy grail of there's got to be a way in which I can have this side gig of porn, masturbation, and escape and be authentically connected. We've been there. There's nothing at the bottom of that barrel. There's
There's
just
got to
not.
there's got to be a way I can be deeply intimate and connected and loved and accepted without showing my whole self. There's got to be a way to keep things hidden and enjoy full intimacy. I can have both.
Yes.
There isn't.
Well, and Sparkler 39, which is one of our two mods who we just so appreciate, along with CCB 1995. So special thank you to both of them today for all that they've done to set this up. We hope that you guys will extend the same to them, and you'll communicate with your mods after this about what you'd like to see in future iterations of this, or if you'd like to see a future iteration of this or not, or whatever, because we'll be communicating with them. But she says something great here. She says, it brings up the shame, and they have to be prepared to face that.
Absolutely.
The man in the mirror is the hardest part of this, and it's a journey, guys. The training as a certified sex addiction therapist, as a CSAT, the training I got on a formal disclosure process was 40 hours long from really, really smart people, like the smartest people on planet Earth when it comes to this stuff. Navigating a disclosure in my office, and I know Mark is not far off from this, typically prep for a disclosure is a 3 month plus process. And that's if the people involved in it are doing the work. This
Yeah.
is not a little thing. Like this, and can we just tell you? I don't mean to distract myself from my own statement, but it needs to be said, or else I'll forget. Do not do a formal disclosure without professional intervention, please. Please do not navigate a formal disclosure without the help of a therapist. We have this new up and coming formal disclosure class or a self study course that Mark and I are putting together, and that will greatly minimize how much a therapist has to be involved in terms of the prep. But that course itself, the first thing it's going to say is that in order to actually implement this formal disclosure, you both have to have individual therapists to make this work. Okay. And we would say the same thing to you. Love your marriage enough to save the money, take the time, whatever you need to do, because a formal disclosure can either be one of the best things you do for a marriage or for a relationship, or it will be the death blow, depending on how it's navigated.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of an aside. But going back to what we were talking about initially here, I agree with Mark wholeheartedly. Guys, some things may be lost to time, but a lot isn't. And again, we know what it's like to get so good at kind of justifying and rationalizing with yourself that you kind of start to believe your own stuff. Please love your spouse and your marriage enough to pull up the past. The past has to be resolved. It's not a place that your spouse is going to live in. It's not a place that the therapist that's going to help you. The goal of a disclosure, and I remember feeling this way, is not to rip you over the coals and drag you through the mud and tie you to the back of an emotional wagon and just, tar and feather you. That's not the goal. The goal is for you to be able to own your stuff in real time and to, as I told a couple recently to a guy who was highly resistant for just to do a disclosure, this is your chance for the first time ever to get completely emotionally naked with your partner. And whatever else they deserve that. Okay.
Yep. I tell couples this, if you approach this in a healthy way, it will be the deepest intimacy that you have ever experienced. Why?
Yes.
Because you're allowing yourself for the first time to be fully seen.
Love your partner enough to let them choose you. Mark and I know what it's like to manipulate. I'll just own it. You can call it lots of things and sugarcoat it. At the end of the day, what did it come down to? All the things that Mark and I used to do, we were manipulating our partners and trying to getting them to stay. And I can tell you, as a guy from experience, on the one hand, can you manipulate a partner to a degree? Yeah, you can. But what cost does that come at? They will never be able to choose you. I'm moving towards the camera for emphasis. They will never be able to choose you. And that is a tragedy.
Unless you let your full self be seen.
Exactly. As two guys who spent between 10 and 30 years not letting ourselves be chosen, please don't reinvent the wheel. Take that step and make that next step so that your marriage, your relationship can have the opportunity to. Does that involve the risk of rejection? Always. It
Always.
absolutely does. But on the other side of that risk is where some of the best things happen in a relationship.
Exactly.
So, okay.
All right. Well, let's wrap up. Boy, we're almost
Yeah.
90 minutes in.
We are so sorry. We did the same damn thing yesterday. Gosh. This is going like my individual therapy sessions. It's like supposed to be 60 minutes and then we end up giving away all sorts of stuff. So,
Well, you can see how passionate we are. This is just a little taste of some of what happens in Dare to Connect, and we hope to see some of you over there,
uh,
and would love to spend time with you there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do, especially your partners. We're just so impressed with you. We just applaud you for just you're just awesome, amazing people.
absolutely.
And, uh,
Thank you again for having us here, and especially thank you one more time to the moderators here, Sparkler 39 and CCB 1985. We appreciate both of you so much, and thank you for facilitating this. And we'll be in contact with you over the next couple of days. Reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you on Monday-ish, and we'll figure out how to get all this stuff posted. But thank you for taking time out of your weekends to facilitate all this. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we will talk to you all soon. Okay,
take care.
take care. Bye bye.